This episode of the Aquarist Podcast is sponsored by Aquarium Co-op and their amazing all-in-one fertilizer, Easy Green. If you're like me and love planted tanks but weren't born with an aquatic green thumb, Easy Green is the stuff for you. Easy Green is super easy to dose, and I use it in all of my planted tanks, both high and low-tech setups. I follow the instructions on the bottle, and the results are healthy, vibrant plants. I know so many other aquarists who swear by Easy Green, and their tanks look amazing. You can even go back to previous episodes of this podcast where you hear several guests talk about their experience and love for this stuff. So head on over to aquariumcoop.com, drop some Easy Green in your cart, and use the code Aquarist5 at checkout to receive 5% off your order. And if you needed it, Corey has numerous videos on the Aquarium Co-op YouTube channel where he talks all about Easy Green, how to use it, and shows off his own tanks at home and in the store that are thriving on the stuff. Lastly, if you're enjoying the podcast, share the show with your friends, leave a rating wherever you listen to the episodes, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Tuesday, November 6th, 2018. My guest today is Zenzo Tazawa. And aside from having probably the coolest name in the game, Zenzo is incredibly active in the hobby, running a 30-tank fish room. He's got a popular YouTube channel and an aquarium maintenance business. So Zenzo, welcome to the Aquarist Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if people can tell just so far based on the audio, but this is a live recording. We are
live.
You let a stranger into your house. You actually took me around the city for the day. So we are in San Francisco, California, on an absolutely picture-perfect, beautiful fall day. Could not have asked for better conditions. Flew in early this morning and met up with Zenzo and spent the whole day with him. So fantastic opportunity to hang out with you, get to know you. And now we get to do an interview on the Aquarist Podcast, so I'm stoked.
Awesome. Yeah, it was fun. We went and saw a couple really cool fish stores, which we'll talk about, and had some good food, so it's always fun to hang out with fellow fish geeks.
Yeah, totally. All right, Zenzo, so what is your origin story, man? How did you get your... And he was actually about to take a drink of water.
No, that's fine.
Hit him with the question.
So, let's see, my origin story as far as getting into the hobby. So I was a young kid here in San Francisco, and... in Golden Gate Park, we have a large public aquarium. At that time, it was called Steinhardt Aquarium. It's changed. It's been remodeled, and now it's called the California Academy of Sciences. But the Steinhardt Aquarium was a very fun place to hang out as a kid. Not only did they have, a full aquarium, but they had some natural history stuff as well. So you could see stuffed, grizzly bears and fossils and things like that. But I fell in love with fish when I would go there. I was just, enthralled and amazed at seeing the tanks. They had a room where you would go in, and it was a big circular room where they had, like tuna swimming in a circle. And I really just fell in love with the aquatic life at that time. And I was a young kid, but something about keeping life in like its own separate ecosystem was just so interesting to me. And a few years after that, I got my first tank. I think like everybody, I had a goldfish bowl first. After about a week, we decided that a goldfish bowl wasn't going to work. So then we went out and got a 20-gallon aquarium and moved the goldfish into that. Now I know that that's still too small. But at that time, we had goldfish in there.
So supportive parents, though.
They were very supportive. And when I was a kid, I did a lot of different animals. For a brief period of time, we lived in the country up in Northern California, so I would go out and catch lizards and tadpoles and, everything else that I could, capture and put in some kind of box or cage. And I had a lot of other, I had birds and mice and hamsters and turtles and salamanders, but always loved fish the most. So my parents were supportive in that. And then kind of in my mid to late teenage years, into my early 20s, I didn't keep anything because I was just, young guy running around and, doing young guy stuff, right? And I wasn't really concerned with aquariums and stuff at that time. So more interested in motorcycles and chasing girls and that kind of thing. And then when I was in my mid-20s, I got the bug again and decided to get back into the hobby.
Do you remember what sparked you getting the bug again?
It wasn't let's see here. It wasn't anything that I can remember, like some defining moment. I just missed having a tank. And I think when I was 26, I started searching around online and found I got a 55-gallon acrylic tank. And then I started experimenting with different types of fish. And for a while I was doing like South American. I had a bunch of Geophagus. And then I changed my mind, and then I wanted to do like Asian. I had like gouramis and things like that. And then a couple years after that, and then during that same period of time, I had other tanks. So I had like a 20-gallon Planet tank. And then I got into cichlids. And I want to say I got into cichlids maybe back in 2003 or 2002, 2003, right around there. I got into African cichlids and then realized how fun they were. Because of the color, their activity, the energy level of the fish, the fact that they will spawn and hold the fry in their mouth. I was interested in that, and I loved the kind of activity that the African cichlid tank had. So I continued on for quite a while with African cichlids. And ended up where I would, take fry, grow them out a little bit, and then give them to the fish store, trade them for food or, store credit and things like that. So I did that for a while.
How active were you in the fish community at that point?
In the fish community, I was zero. I was not active at all. There was not. I was not aware of any fish club or other people that were into the hobby, other than when I went to the store and would talk to my friends at the store. Mm-hmm. But I was really, and the internet wasn't, very prevalent back in the mid 2000s yet. Anything, there wasn't a YouTube as an example. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of did my thing, read a lot of magazines. Back in the day, I would go to the fish store and get my magazines and, thumb through those for hours at a time. And then in the late 2000s, maybe right around 2008, I moved and I had to sell some tanks and didn't have a fish tank for a couple of years. But I had to have fish, so I kept bettas. And so I would keep a betta in my office. I would keep a betta at home. So I always had something, to make me feel like I was still an aquarist and I was still active in keeping fish.
Are you stockpiling any of your tanks at that point, or did you divest and sell them all?
Yeah, it was, and at that time I only had a couple tanks anyway. So sold everything, and I wish I had some of that gear because I had some cool stuff back then. But anyway,
that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's so painful when you get out of the hobby, you sell everything, and then you get back in, and you wish, all that great stuff that I had, all the great stuff,
the canister filters and the hang-on the backs, and my battery-powered air pumps, and all the things that I still need, I got rid of. So anyway, a couple of years I didn't have bettas, didn't have tanks, and just had bettas, and this was maybe less than 2 years when I didn't have a fish tank. I just kept bettas, and then when I moved back to San Francisco, I got back into keeping fish tanks again, and then so then I started off with let me get a little community tank and set that up in my living room. So I had a little 16-gallon bow front and planted it and did some different things with that. And but I would always change my mind. I go, I still I want to do something different. I want frogs, so that I got a separate tank for frogs, and then I got a separate tank for more bettas, and so started to have like these little small nano tanks all around my apartment in San Francisco. And then when I moved into this house, I said, okay, well, now I've got space for larger tanks. So, and my wife, she was supportive at the time because she knows how much I love fish and with all the small tanks and stuff that I've had. And so she got me a 75-gallon for Christmas one year. And I think that was probably the end of sanity.
Yeah.
And
I don't think they ever know what they're about to unleash.
It's the rabbit hole that you don't want to go down, right? So, so then I kind of dove headfirst back into keeping cichlids again. So then I'm like, okay, well now I can get my African cichlids again. So that was the first thing I did, as I set up my cichlid tank. And then from there I started to just acquire more tanks. And at first it was just kind of out of necessity. So if you keep African cichlids, for those of you that have kept African cichlids or aggressive fish, you need to have a place where you can rehabilitate fish, heal them if they've been injured because they can be aggressive, and also to keep fry when they spawn. So I said, well, let me just set up a few tanks downstairs in the basement. So I set up like 4 20-gallon tanks down there and set up some air pumps and some sponge filters. And little by little, it grew. And the other thing that happened is around that same period of time, because every time I would go into a fish store, someone would say, hey, I need some help and this and that. So I decided to set up my service business, which is not my main source of income, but it's kind of a side thing that I do just to pay for the aquarium hobby. So I set up the aquarium business, and because of that, then I said, well, I need some additional tanks to quarantine fish if a customer wants me to hold fish for them. And then people know that you're a fish person, so they're like, hey, I've got this tank. We don't know what to do with it. Can you take it? So then you start to accumulate tanks. And then, you get the multiple tank syndrome, and next thing you know, you've got 35 tanks around the house, and that's where I am now.
Yeah, and I think you're in a similar situation to me with me where, you kind of set up tanks. You don't really know where you're going to go, where you're going to end up, and then it kind of turns into a fish room. But it's not your ideal fish room, right?
Yeah. So originally it was not going to be a fish room. It was just a fish wall is what it was. It's like, okay, I'm just going to set up 4 tanks here. They're downstairs, out of sight, out of mind. I can, take care of them, and they don't have to look pretty or anything like that. And then 4 became 6, became 8, 12. And then at that point, I think when I had like 12 tanks or something, I said, I need to clear out some more space down here and make a real fish room. So then I got super excited, and I followed Corey from Aquarium Co-op's earlier videos where he was building stands using the concrete blocks and 2x4s. So I bought a bunch of tanks on sale at the $1 per gallon sale and set up these stands. And next thing you know, I'm plumbing PVC for air. But in hindsight, I should have planned it out. I should have had a plan. And really understood what I was getting into and planned better,
But that's so hard, though, to know where you're going to end up when multiple tank syndrome hits.
Right.
And just how out of control it can become. Out of control in an awesome way, I mean.
Yeah.
But to your credit, though, I would say your fish room, you're an incredibly resourceful person. The amount of DIY and how you've optimized for a fish room that isn't running on an auto water change system, your tanks aren't drilled for overflow. I mean, you've set it up with the ABS drain pipe, so I would assume your siphoning process is minimally invasive for you. It's not all that time consuming, and then your ability to get water back into the tanks. I think you've done a fantastic job, and you probably don't need me to give you credit for that, but you've done an awesome job of working with what you have in kind of a fish room that's just kind of growing, as opposed to being able to start from scratch, knowing that you're going to have 40 tanks or something in that range, where you and I, we were talking about it, that your next fish room, right, all of these lessons learned, you're going to be able to pile those into your next fish room and just dial it out.
Yeah, so that is I think kind of the dream is to build the fish room exactly how you want it. Just like if someone has a dream house or a dream garage or whatever it is, you have an idea of what it's going to look like. So I do have an idea about what the fish room will look like when I do move and create a new fish room. But yeah, there are a lot of lessons learned, obviously. And for me, I like to be very efficient. As we were talking about earlier today, I do have a lot of balls in the air. So between weightlifting and work and travel and fish business and family and keeping fish,
you can deadlift like a car. Like,
well,
you can lift a lot.
The way that
weight,
I say it is, I can deadlift a 55-gallon aquarium full of water, rocks, and fish. So that's that's a lot of weight. But
that is.
But so I do like to be very efficient with my time. So with the water change, even though I'm doing it manually, I've set up a system to where I can do, so like down in the fish room with the 30 tanks or so, it doesn't take me that long to do water changes. I probably spend maybe 180 minutes a week doing water changes down there. It sounds like a lot, but it's not when you split it up into different days. So I can split it up into different days and different times, and it's pretty manageable. And what I do is I'll do half the tanks one day and half the tanks another day. So I'm actually doing water changes down there about 4 times every 8 days or so, which seems like a lot. I guess it is, but When it's only 45 minutes at a time or something, it's really not that bad. And then the same with the tanks upstairs. Like I can sit here and work on my laptop editing video or something and do water changes in the display tanks in the living room because I'm just pumping the water out and then I'm just putting water back in with the Python. So as long as I can see the tank, then I'm not worried about it. So we can drain for 25 minutes and I don't have to be there. So it's all about being efficient. And it took a long time because at first, it would take me an hour and a half to do one tank because I have to do it this way because this is the way everyone says you're supposed to do it. And I just decided, I need to keep it simple and be efficient with my time.
Yeah, especially with, you running your aquarium maintenance business, which we kind of talked about that, you're scaling back a little bit. You're still keeping some customers on that you're loyal to. But, you need to be efficient in that, right? Because you're going into somebody's home or somebody's office and you don't want to be there all day long. You want to be in and out. You want to do your thing and make it so that it's the most advantageous to your time. So that it makes sense, right? It makes sense for you to do it as a business to help kind of cover the fish expenses. If you will.
Exactly. Yeah, if I'm going into a business and I'm, servicing a couple of aquariums, I don't want to be there that long. They don't want me there that long. And the longer I'm there, the more time and money it's costing me essentially. So sometimes like when I'm doing maintenance at that office building, for example, with one of my customers where there's 2 tanks, people will like stop and want to chit chat with me about something. And I basically say like, yeah, okay. And then like, I'll run away. I'll run down the hall because I'm running to the next tank because I want to, scrape the algae while the other one's draining. And then I want to run back and,
the greatest excuse ever if somebody wants to stop and talk to you is, oh man, I think that tank's going to overflow.
There's
and
water
you just
running.
Take off
Yeah.
and nobody's going to stop you and say, no, we need to finish our conversation.
Right. And actually there have been times when I got a little distracted or something and there's been some close calls where water was almost going to overflow or something. So yeah, you have to really be focused and efficient. It really is. And a lot of people, I think, and maybe, people listening to this podcast maybe don't feel this way, but for a lot of people out there, they feel like keeping fish is difficult. And in my experience, it's one of the easiest things to do as far as animal husbandry. Having owned other animals. In fact, just recently we gave away a chinchilla. So my daughter, like a year and a half ago, she's a senior in high school, so she was a junior at the time. She comes home with a chinchilla, and she says, "Oh, my friend had to give her chinchilla away because they got a rabbit, and her parents wouldn't let her keep both." Well, for those of you that are, experienced with, small animals like that, they require a lot of care. You have to clean out their cage, and it's not like you got to like scrape away like yucky stuff that's in like the sawdust or whatever you're using. You got to, make sure they're fed and clean you can't get them wet. I mean, it's a lot of work. And we had a dog up until recently. He passed away. So keeping fish is not that difficult. If you choose to make it simple and efficient. So I think people are sometimes afraid of the aquarium hobby because they think that, it's hard to keep aquariums and fish are going to die. It's really not that difficult. I think for me, I make it difficult because I choose to keep 35 tanks. But if I just had like these 4 tanks in the living room, it's vacuuming the living room takes just as much time almost, so.
Yeah, and your fish don't jump on the guests that come over. They're not tearing up your favorite slippers.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong. I've got 2 dogs. I love my furry animals, but they don't add the same aesthetic appeal to your home. A nice planted tank or a nice African cichlid tank. You don't get the same kind of aesthetic appeal that my lazy half boxer sleeping on the couch does. So
yeah, it's very different. Like so with our dog was a golden retriever, and he was a very loving dog, and you do get that. Interaction with the dog as an example where you can hug him and hold him and touch him. And fish are different, right? Unless you have like a fun Oscar or something. But fish for me, it's very peaceful. For me, it's kind of like gardening in some sense, like especially with a planted tank, or if you're doing any kind of hardscape or aquascaping, it's like planting a nice, beautiful garden, like a flower garden, or doing some landscaping and just enjoying that scenery, coupled with like having a living kind of biotope that's almost like a moving, living picture. So like, my African cichlid tank with the rock background and the beautiful fish swimming around, it's like looking at a picture on the wall that's alive. So
yeah, no, I completely agree. So I think what's so great to hear about your origin story is that you have dabbled and experienced several different aspects of the hobby. Like, you're not just an African cichlid guy, as much as I want to box you into that because your fish room is full of African cichlids and whatnot, which is nothing wrong with that. But you've done a lot in your time as an aquarist. What are some of the species? What are some of the next kind of steps for you, and what you want to pivot in, or what you want to do as a hobbyist?
Yeah, I think for me, I get bored easily, which is probably why I do so many different things. And because I love the fish keeping hobby, I don't see myself ever getting out of keeping fish, but I do see myself keeping different types of fish over the years, and in future years. I am mainly into freshwater. I have, stuck my toe in saltwater at times. One of my customers has a saltwater tank that I take care of, so I have to, know enough to, keep a tank healthy.
You know enough not to get into saltwater.
I know enough not to get, because that's a whole different, and I do appreciate it. I do find the beauty in it. I've just always gravitated to freshwater. Even when I was a young kid, when we went to the aquarium, it was always the freshwater tanks that was more interesting to me than the saltwater tanks, which is interesting because most kids they want to see the saltwater tanks, and because they are very beautiful. But for me, it was more about, wow, look at this, silver dollar, and that's, in this brown water tank or something. And that, to me, that was interesting. But yeah, I think African cichlids is something that I'm passionate about right now. And I probably will always be involved with African cichlids, and maybe moving towards other types of Africans, maybe getting into Victorians, maybe doing more Lake Tanganyikan fish. But I've got the plant bug recently. As you noticed, I have a planted aquarium here. That is my first high-tech tank. I've done low-tech planted tanks before. So getting into high-tech tanks is new for me, and that's exciting. And there are other fish that I would like to keep in the future. I just don't have the space for them. And it sounds funny when I have 35 tanks and I don't have space for them. But one day I'd like to try discus. I'd like to do another big South American tank with some geophagus.
I think the perfect fish for you, and I'm going to be a broken record on this one, but a Shodantai puffer for your planted tank right over there with the tetras. I think that would give you the kind of wet pet Oscar cichlid appeal, but snail control. So, which is kind of always nice in a nice planted tank. You don't want your snail population to go out of control, especially the little guys.
Yeah.
The little
pond.
Well, the pond snails I'm okay with. I think it's the pond snails are the ones that are very easy to crush when you try to pick them out.
Right.
Though it's the even smaller ones than those ones. Those ones, they seem to reproduce even faster than pond snails.
Right. Well, you have the Malaysian trumpet snails that are like, I think they're live bearing or something.
Not the trumpet snails, not the trumpet snails, but they're like round
ram's horns,
circular guy. Not even ram's horns, they're smaller.
Okay,
super small. We'll dig it up. I'll find out what I'm talking about. But nonetheless, your Shodantai puffer will take care of those guys. A ton of personality, just an absolutely awesome fish, and in that size aquarium would be just perfect. And he'll hang out, he'll hide behind the plants, he'll see you coming, he'll pop out.
The only thing that worries me about that is my shrimp. Will it eat my shrimp? Because I have a lot of shrimp in there.
So I've put mine in with cherry shrimp, and every once in a while, I'm pretty sure I still see the same number of cherry shrimp that I initially put in there.
Reproducing enough to.
And I think between the feedings of, Poe is pretty fat at this point.
Right.
I might actually be overfeeding him or her. But I would like to think that it's just healthy. But between the snails that he does get and the cocktail shrimp also. So I kind of do a mix of the two, because if I just gave him all snails, he would just eat me out of snails super fast. I think he leaves the shrimp alone. And I think the shrimp are actually fairly quick.
Right.
I don't think he's fast enough to get to get them.
All right.
So,
that would be my only concern. And I have a ton of snails on purpose.
And you just put some shrimp in there too.
I just put more shrimp in there, yeah. So there's a lot of snails in there. I put a bunch of Malaysian trumpet snails to kind of help with the substrate.
They'll be fine.
Because they're hidden, right? Yep. And then I have a bunch of snails downstairs too. I actually feed them to my Oscar. My Oscar loves eating the snails.
Really?
As long as they're big enough. So I make sure that they're large enough, and they have like an internal mouth where they could like their teeth are recessed, so he'll chomp them, and even like a good size, thick Malaysian trumpet snail, he'll crush it. And
wow, I don't think I've ever heard of anybody talking about feeding their Oscar snails at all.
So in the wild, so everyone thinks like, oh, my Oscars, they eat like other small fish. Like people feed fish to their Oscars. In the wild, they do a lot of like invertebrates, snails, crabs, shrimp, even like some vegetation, like seeds that fall in the water. So they're not really out there hunting, feeder fish, right? They're out there foraging and
they're just highly opportunistic and will get down on inverts if that's what they can get their mouth on.
Yep.
Huh.
So he loves them. So I'll just throw a whole bunch in there, and it keeps him engaged. He'll hunt for them, and
definitely, and being able to gut load them, right? So your snails are eating a lot of good algae and eating a lot of other good food, and if you're throwing any of those little barley shrimp food in there, they're getting down on that. So that's probably really healthy, as opposed to, I know a lot of us like to do the beef heart thing for Oscars, but maybe that's probably more in line with what their wild diet would be.
So and the research that I've done on Oscars is they shouldn't really have any terrestrial-based food. So beef heart is popular for Oscars, and it's popular for discus, but they don't have access to any land-based animals in the water, right? It's all freshwater seafood, not seafood, but fresh, water food. So, so snails are part of their diet in the wild, and he chews them up and loves them.
That's very cool. One, I'm glad we finally got a chance to get a little bit more in depth on Oscars. Everybody that listens to this knows that I had an Oscar tank, and Oscars hold a special place in my heart. And I got excited when I got a chance to see your Oscar, and we got to learn more about them, right? So anybody out there with Oscars, try feeding them some snails. See what happens. If they take to it, again, it sounds like that's going to be a nice win, because
it's a good snail control.
Snail control, and it's going to be a healthier, right? Maybe it helps to prevent hole in the head or any of these other afflictions that happen to Oscars.
One of the other things that I like with giving invertebrates to fish is that, and I talked to Corey about this too, and he kind of has the same philosophy. Corey at Aquarium Co-op, is that the outer shell of some of these animals helps in the passing of waste in the intestines of the fish. Like fiber like if we eat, a stalk of celery, it helps us obviously with our digestive tract and everything. So brine shrimp and other animals that have shells, it helps for the fish that are eating them to just have a clear tract. So.
Oh, nice. No, definitely makes sense. Yeah. All right, so let's pivot to talking about. So you live here in San Francisco. I mean, I would say that we're kind of in the heart of the city. I feel like we are. It's a very San Francisco, like you have a San Francisco city zip code. So we are in the city. So what is it like being an aquarist in San Francisco? I feel like it can't be easy, right? I've never lived here before. I'm from Northern California, so I've been to the city plenty of times, and it just feels like between the traffic and just how everything's kind of bunched up on each other. What is your take? Yeah,
so I think being a fish keeper in San Francisco has its challenges. Geographically, we're pretty much in the middle of the city, but as far as the neighborhoods are concerned, we are a little bit more in that kind of suburban feel. Like we've got 2-car garage and plenty of parking, so it's not like downtown where you're like on top of each other. But one of the things that we don't have a lot of in San Francisco is space. I'm fortunate that I live in a pretty good-sized home with a basement where we do have space. But a lot of people, there's a lot of apartment living or, townhome living or living in a flat with shared spaces. So a lot of fish keepers in San Francisco don't do large tanks. The ones that have the large tanks are usually the older generation that are kind of living out in the avenues that, have been in the hobby for many, many years, and they still have big tanks. But a lot of newer fish keepers, a lot of younger fish keepers have smaller tanks because of space. So it's a lot of nano tanks, a lot of planted tanks. And it is a challenge when you just, even like, let's say, wanting to go to a store and, grab a 30-gallon tank and put it in your apartment. It's not easy to transport it, and if you're parking on a street and having to go up an elevator or something, all of those things are very difficult versus living in the suburbs where you can just pull into your driveway and have your friends load in your 240 or something like that. However, even though it's difficult logistically, as far as getting around with traffic and things like that, and spatially as far as space for tanks, we do have a lot of fish resources. So there's a lot of local fish stores that you don't see in a lot of suburban areas. So my experience, having lived in the suburbs before, you mostly have the big box stores. You'll have your PetSmarts, your Petco's, and those kind of places. And every once in a while you have a local fish store. We're here in San Francisco. Like we went to a couple really cool ones today, but there's a whole bunch more that I didn't take you, all within the same distance driving. So there are, and if I just think off the top of my head, I can go to a specialty store that does like discus and angelfish. We can go to a store that does like big cichlids and predator fish, planned aquariums. We have an ADA store. There's the kind of that Hong Kong style fish market that we were at today. So there's a lot of different places to get fish and different kinds. So being in San Francisco, because it does have a large population, we do have a lot of options. So that is one thing that is, and we have the big box stores too. So there's a lot of places to find some really cool things that you wouldn't see when you're in other areas. In addition, because there's so many people, there's fish clubs. So we have one here in San Francisco. There's one in Sacramento, which is a couple hours away. There's one down in San Jose, which is about an hour away. So there's a lot of, people that gather together to geek out on fish and plants and things like that.
Awesome. And on the note of the fish stores, in your time that you've lived in San Francisco and been active in the hobby, have you noticed what's the trend? Are we opening more stores? Are we closing more stores? Or is it kind of holding flat?
It's kind of holding flat. We're definitely not opening any more stores. And in talking to a few of the owners, I think there's always the risk of them losing their lease or the lease getting increased to where it doesn't make sense for them to have a business anymore. And I've talked to a couple store owners that have shared that with me before. And that's just because of, kind of what's happening in San Francisco. The demographics is changing. There's more money in the city, so rents are going up and storefronts are, costing more. But so far we've been lucky to where the stores aren't closing. But I don't know how long they can sustain that. I think a lot of them are just kind of, surviving and not thriving. And my take is that if something were to happen where business plummeted for a period of 2 or 3 months, some of these would fail. I was talking to an owner yesterday on the phone at one of the stores, and they had mentioned to me that business was slow for the past week and a half, and it affects them, it hurts them. So there's a lot of things that can affect it, whether it be, some event or weather, but I think there is the risk of that culture going away. Even a store that we went to today at Ocean Aquarium, you don't find stores like that anymore.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
I love that segue. I definitely want to talk about Ocean Aquarium, but I guess one point I would want to say is, with the changing demographics, with the, influx of tech money into this area that are just, driving things through the roof, you would hope if anybody out there needs a slice of nature in their life, it would be some of these software development engineers, some of these, the power vesters, right? Like these people that have their head in code and, these apps and tech, and they're so engrossed in their lives of technology that we need some type of outreach. Like we need to work with Google HR, Facebook HR, and a part of their employee wellness, right? We need to somehow build in there. Putting an aquarium in your apartment is somehow a way to get either
it's therapeutic, right?
Some type of money, some type of discount on your insurance. I don't know what it is, but we need to work an angle. So if we get this slice of nature in your house, that there's a benefit in that we can get some of this tech money to be invested back into some of these mom and pop stores. And you brought up Ocean Aquarium, which I mean, that's been featured in your videos. It's been featured in Aquarium Co-op, and I think Jimmy and Joel and probably many other people that have went to this store. And I'm definitely going to have a link. I'll check on your channel. I'll see if I can find I'll find your videos and put in the link to the show notes of this. But Ocean Aquarium, run by Justin and his wife, Addie Ha, I think is how we're going to say their last name, and I apologize, Justin, for butchering your last name. He's been doing it for 20 some odd years in that location?
A long time, yeah.
A long time. This is, like Zenzo said, they don't make stores like this anymore, and this being an auditory experience, I can't begin to describe it, but it is just the most incredible fish keeping planted tank aquarium experience. When I say planted tank, don't think of like fancy ADA, clean, polished, sterile showroom. Like, this is just gritty San Francisco at its roots, but with an absolute nut of a hobbyist running it. And it is cluttered, it is packed with product, it is packed with beautiful fish and amazing tanks that you will never ever see again in your life in this small location in a back alley. And I'm coining it like, this is, if you're into this hobby and if you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously a fish nerd, this is your mecca, this is your pilgrimage, this is one of the places on your fish keeping bucket list. You need to come to Ocean Aquarium in San Francisco. San Francisco is a destination in and of itself, but while you're here, you need to go there and spend a minimum of an hour in this tiny store and just drink it all in, because it is an amazing, amazing place. I got a chance to hang out with Justin. I wanted to interview him, but it just wasn't appropriate. It wasn't the right time and place. I was able to buy a little piece of artwork he did of some Pseudomoga illuminatus. Maybe I'll post a picture of this, but this is for sure going in my fish room or somewhere that's next to all my fish art. I'm so thrilled to have something that man painted. I mean, his store, like I said, I can't say it enough. It is a mecca. It is a pilgrimage in and of itself. It is an absolute jewel of our hobby. It's a national treasure of the aquarium hobby.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's definitely not something that you would expect to find in most cities,
it's
right?
like Gringotts Alley in Harry Potter. Like, you don't expect to find that. Oh, no, that's Gringotts is the bank. It's Diagon Alley.
It's more like when you went to go buy the Gremlins. Right.
Yeah, it is. It's the Gremlin shop.
So that's kind of like, it's like some secret little, like a speakeasy for fish is basically, like going back in time. And his method of keeping tanks is very unique as well, right? As far as not doing the water changes and letting it kind of nature filter the aquariums as it's intended through.
And rewind. He just said, not doing water changes.
Yeah. So he doesn't do water changes. In fact, we saw a tank today that it was a planted tank. It was beautiful. It was I forgot the size of it, but it was like it was almost like it was long and narrow, like a nano tank, but maybe like 10 gallons, but long and
like a 10 or 12 gallon. Yeah, one of those guys.
And I think he said it's been that way since like 2004 or something like that. And it's got a thick substrate for the anaerobic bacteria, and I think he just has like a little air bubbling in there, just to kind of break the surface tension, and that's about it. And the thing looks amazing.
You will be blown away at the level of DIY ingenuity, low tech, but just results that you will never see. Like, you will never see anywhere else unless you go and copy his method. Which he's free to talk about. I mean, there was no secrets with this man. Like, he's just a hobbyist gone wild in a store, and just loves what he does. Just absolutely loves what he does. And I can't recommend this place enough to go check out. That in and of itself was a wonderful experience. And then you also got a chance to take me to 6th Avenue Aquarium,
which is a very different experience, right? So 6th Avenue Aquarium is kind of like, I've never been to Hong Kong, so I don't know, but it's kind of what I imagine like a local fish store would look like in a busy area like that. It's very busy. There's like loud music blaring all the time. People are coming in and out of the door. No plants in that store that I can, or maybe they had
one little section
of plants,
but nothing incorporated.
Nothing's planted. Everything is just bare acrylic boxes, but with the most unusual fish that you would not expect to find, and fish that you would not be able to even order at some stores.
Oddballs galore.
And there's fish that are probably controversial as far as, should they be kept in the hobby. They've got a bunch of red-tailed catfish. They've got shovel-nose catfish. They had a whole bunch of arowana. There were some other things that we saw there that I can't recall right now. But just even the big saltwater shark, that was probably, I don't know, 20 inches long or something like that. So just a lot of interesting things that you wouldn't normally see in a fish store. And what really makes it interesting is how they keep the fish. So all of the fish are kept in these really small cubes, these acrylic cubes, and it's all on one central water system. So you'll have like an 8-inch arowana that's in like a 1 gallon cube almost, right? Or, whatever. Obviously, it's not living in 1 gallon of water. It's living in hundreds of gallons of water, but it's just kind of kept on its own that way. And then when people want to buy the fish, they go to the front counter, they get a net, they go back to the tank, and they scoop out the fish themselves, and they bring that fish to the counter in a little bucket of water. So,
and this blew me away. And I brought it up several times in the store. I took pictures of a little man that was just going to town picking out his fish. He was taking his time. He had his little specimen container, and he was just doing his thing, looking for the fish he wanted. And it blew my mind that it's basically, here's your net, here's your container, go get your fish.
Yeah, it's nothing that I've seen before in any other store. Every other store that I've been to, it's always an employee catching the fish.
And as we were leaving, there was a professional gal who looked like she just got off of work,
business suit.
Maybe
I don't know, 40.
Yeah, let's say she was in her late 30s, right?
Okay.
So nonetheless, she comes in, she's just out of work. She's in high heels. She's in her nice dress. She's got, her makeup. She's ready. She just got off of work, and she walks up to the counter, gets her net, gets her little specimen container, and she goes over, and I think she was getting crayfish.
Yeah, some crayfish or crabs or something.
Just wild, man. That where else do you see that? Maybe you see it in Hong Kong. I don't know. Maybe you see it in China, but not here though. And that's just one of the jewels that you have. And you only took me to 2 of your cool stores.
Yeah, we only went to 2 stores. So next time you come down, we'll go to some others. Because there are every store that I visit and frequent, they all have their own little charm in some way. And so I just you wanted to go to Ocean Aquarium, obviously, and then I thought 6th Avenue would be kind of a good contrast to that, just to kind of see the opposite end of the spectrum. But there are a lot of those cool little fish stores, but sadly, I think, in the future, they will disappear if we don't get more people involved in the hobby, and involved in the hobby in the right way. Not just not because they saw Finding Nemo and now they're getting a fish for their kid, or they want to get glowfish or something because they're bright and vibrant or something, but because they really want to have a piece of nature and really, foster something that's, different and bringing some value to their lives.
Yeah, and I mean that that's coming from a guy that works remotely from home a lot of the time, right? You're plugged into technology. You run a very busy and well performing YouTube channel, right? So you are constantly being bombarded in digital media, digital advertising, in technology. It's immersed in your life.
Yep.
And you understand, like I do, and many people out there, the importance of having kind of a reset button, right? And that's what the aquarium hobby brings to us, is that ability to reset, to reconnect with nature, and to just take, whatever little moment of time we have to just kind of sit back and look at our tanks and appreciate it, and just really enjoy it. And, a couple days ago, I did a badly needed scape on my main 75-gallon planted tank. And, once I got done with that, I just sat back and, my son was taking a nap, and it was one of those few moments that I just had to kind of breathe and, just kind of pause.
Yeah.
And it was nice. It was so nice to see the rainbows, the Bosemani, the Praycocks. I think the Pandagara was getting down. Everybody was having a good time. The tank was just scaped, and it looked great.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do is, and I am, I live in the tech capital of the U.S. at least, right? And here in the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley. First thing I do when I wake up is, look at my phone and check my email. I've usually got 2 or 3 laptops on our, here on the table, and
there literally are multiple laptops that mine's in my bag, but those are yours.
Yeah, there's 3 right here. I've got 2 PCs and a MacBook, all kinds of stuff, cell phones, iPads. but what I like to do is just sit on that green easy chair right in front of those two tanks and just sit there and relax for maybe, just 20 minutes or so, just staring at the fish and nothing else.
Yeah, no, I noticed that chair too. That chair is awkwardly positioned purposely for viewing fish tanks.
Corey took a nap in that chair, actually.
Nice.
That's like the comfy green chair, as we call it. So, but yeah, I think it is, in this era, this is the information age, right? So everyone's so thirsty for more and more media, and we're very device centric. But looking back to 20 years ago or so, or 30 years ago when we were kids, we would play outside and catch lizards and do things that people don't do so much anymore. And an aquarium is a great way to still have a piece of nature in your home. And I'm not saying that you have to have a South American biotope with, tannins and, catapa leaves and stuff in there. But, whatever floats your boat, if you have some type of, living, thing that you're taking care of, that you enjoy, it's beautiful, it's healthy. It's especially rewarding if you see the cycle of life where you can see them fish, see the fish spawn. And I think for me, that's probably one of the most rewarding things is when you see that you're keeping these fish in a very unnatural environment, right? Because even though that's a big tank, they would normally be in billions of gallons of water in a lake, right? Versus a couple hundred gallons or whatever, 75 gallons of water. So, but seeing the fish healthy and procreating is rewarding.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. So, moving on, Dreamtrips. So. We were talking a little bit about, what does the docket look like for 2019 for us respectively, and I kind of brought up, wanting to get out there, do some collecting trips. It may not be next year, but that kind of sparked some curiosity with you. So what do you have in your head that you would like to do?
2019, I think, is probably still going to be domestic travel as far as fish is concerned. I'll probably go to a couple of the aquarium related conventions, probably the aquatic experience again, maybe Aquashella. I do want to go to the AGA up in Seattle and this coming spring.
You better come up to AGA, man.
Well, it's on my calendar already.
We're an hour and a half flight up north, man. Too many of us in Seattle to not come out.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep in Corey's fish room if I come up.
You can sleep in my guest room, man. You.
All right, deal.
You're taken care of.
But I do want to do some. We talked about collecting trips. You had mentioned like Mexico or South America. I would like to go to Florida sometime because I think to be in the U.S. and to go to some tropical area where there are some pretty unique fish that aren't supposed to be there, but they are there. Florida would be an opportunity. But I also like to go to Hawaii. So I have a lot of family in Hawaii and on different islands, and some of the areas happen to have a lot of fish that are not, all of them except for a couple of freshwater gobies are introduced, and a lot of them are invasive. But to be able to go out and catch them, but I can't keep them and take them home with me, which it wouldn't really be a collecting trip as far as taking fish home, but it would be fun to just kind of go out and catch them and kind of document that.
So I want you to give a plug to your channel and that video in particular. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
That video that you have?
Yeah. So on my channel, Tazawa Tanks, Tazawa Tanks, I have a video from. It was this summer. It was probably released in July, I want to say. I've been to Hawaii a couple times this year already, but I think I released that video in July. And in this video, I think I start off at one of the resorts in Honolulu, where they've got like dovai, they have paku, they have Oscar cichlids, African cichlids, koi fish, all swimming around in these ponds at the hotel. And then later on, I go to the Waikiki Museum, or not museum, but aquarium, where they've got some wonderful display tanks. They have an Asian arowana there that they confiscated. So the Fish and Game confiscated this fish and put it in the aquarium. And then at the end of the video, we go to this lake. This lake is actually part of the botanical gardens on Oahu. And this lake has hundreds, if not thousands, of fish that are introduced into this lake. So there's like hundreds or thousands of like red devils or Midas cichlids in there. There's a bunch of tilapia in there. There's plecos all over the place. There's carp and other things that I didn't get to see. But when I was there in 2017, I tried to. I don't know why, because the fish are so thick that it's like boiling fish. And I put my hand in there, and one of the red devils jumped out and bit my thumb, and they actually left teeth marks in my thumbnail. So I didn't do that this year, but you can see like the water's just boiling where fish are like on top of each other.
And they're clearly being fed by people, right?
Oh, they're being fed. Yeah, we went and fed them. Like so my brother is also a fish person as well, and he has some tanks at home, and he's into planted tanks, and he does like dry starts, and he'll sell plants, and he has a nice planted tank as well. But he had some old fish food that was sitting around. He's like, hey, we'll bring the fish food. Then we brought some old bread, and yeah, it's just fun.
So I've got a trip for us. So we need to go to Florida. So either somebody that follows you or somebody that listens to this podcast, if you live in Florida, we need some space in your guest room for budgeting purposes, right? Just let us crash on a couch or something. I can talk with Shelby at Seagrass Farms, and we'll do a collecting trip.
That'd be cool.
Maybe she'll let us into Seagrass Farms. We'll check out what they have. I don't think that's a stretch to think that she would let us into Seagrass. But I think if we can make a 2 or 3 day little trip out of that.
That'd be fun.
I think that'd be awesome, and I think that's super doable for 2019.
Yeah, I'd be down for that. And even if we could, I don't know if there are any aquarium conventions or anything in Florida, but maybe even butted up against one of those.
It's even closer too in Texas. So Greg Steves, who I've had on the show, he's got footage of him swimming with diving like super close to his house in some of the local rivers and streams, and I'm pretty sure there's like native live bear, sailfin mollies and whatnot. So
yeah, Texas would have a lot of those because there's a lot of those. There's a lot of live bears from Mexico as well.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So keep it on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have to change currency or anything.
Yeah.
Not have to bust out the passport.
Yeah. So for 2019, I think that's kind of what is in my future. Down the road, I would like to do an East Africa trip. I was talking to Bob Steenfot from Steenfot Aquatics about maybe one day we can go to Lake Tanganyika and check that out. He was very interested in that as well. That would be like an ultimate trip for me. It's to get scuba certified and go there and see.
Do you technically need to be scuba certified though?
I think you do.
In Lake in any of those rift lakes, you think so that they're that? Yeah.
Oh, as far as the regulations?
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of the Wild West.
I believe. Well, I'm sure that if you go there, you have to rent the equipment, right? So if you rent all the equipment and everything, they're going to want to know that you're certified. And those lakes, it's not like a lake here. Those lakes are like the ocean.
Yes.
You can't see the other side, and
they're huge.
You might as well be in the ocean. So the only difference is you're less buoyant because there's less salt in the water. I would assume that if you'd go on some dive tour and they're going to make sure that you're certified, and something like that, I wouldn't want to forge or fake because I don't want to die underwater in East Africa because I, cheaped out on $800 worth of lessons here in California or something.
Hey, fair enough.
But I think that would be a fun trip. South America would also be fun to do one of those collecting trips, whether it be Peru or somewhere in the Amazon. But my preference would be Africa first, just because I like African cichlids the most.
Yeah.
And I think Lake Tanganyika would be very interesting because of all of the diverse species that you have there. Lake Malawi would be interesting also, for sure. And if I went that far, I'd probably try to make both. But if I could only pick one, I'd probably do Tanganyika just because the fish are more unique. Where in Lake Malawi, you have kind of a lot of the same looking fish.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and if you do the Africa trip, given how many connecting flights you would have to do, and that it's the flights alone are a trip in and of themselves.
Probably 2 days to get there and 2 days to get home.
I feel like, don't get me wrong, like that's completely on my Aquarist bucket list as well. But when I go, it's going to have to be for a good chunk of time just to make up for all of that travel, and all those connections, because we're on the West Coast, so we're going to have to, there's at least the one connection here in the States.
Yep.
Probably a connection into Europe somewhere. a connection into a main African city.
Unless we went the other way, right? We could go from the West Coast to, let's say, Asia.
I don't think most people go that way. Like Pam Chin, I think she flew.
Does she go?
I think she went the Europe way.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know which way is, because it seems like it's almost closer to go over the Pacific.
What's Expedia say? Hey Siri. What, no.
because you would be on the east side of the continent too, right?
Sure.
So about maybe like fly from here to Asia to India to East Africa.
Then you'd have to stop and collect in India.
Yeah.
How awesome would that be?
Bunch of are there any?
You know what I want to see? So South Korea and Japan. There's some freshwater fish that you can collect there. There's endemic fish there.
Huh.
Yeah. The articles are very sparse of what's out there.
Right.
They're certainly not tropical fish, but
Sure.
they've got their own little small, cool little fish to collect.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about our heritages. You're half Japanese.
Half Japanese.
I'm half Korean. I don't know if anybody could tell. Nobody can tell that I'm half Korean, but nonetheless. So I think kind of the going back to the roots, seeing where our people come from, if you will, and doing a little fish collecting trip would be pretty neat, I think, as well.
Well, speaking of Japan, my passion that I've never been able to exercise is koi fish, and if I could have a koi pond, I think that would be, for me, kind of maybe not the holy grail, but the one thing that I've never been able to do. The closest I ever got to it is when I did have my 20-gallon tank. My parents got me a koi fish. It was this beautiful gold koi, and when it got to about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches, they gave it away to someone who had a koi pond, obviously. But so I had a koi fish for a few months.
Yeah, hey.
But that would be. Going to Japan, I would love to see that. Although from what I hear, because they don't have a lot of land, that the koi ponds in the U.S. are actually more prevalent and larger than they are over there, just because you don't see them very often over there. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. All right, Zenzo, well, one more time, can you please tell us where can we find you? And I'll make sure that whatever you say, we have in the show notes. So, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. This is going to be one of those days that just goes down, in my own personal history of amazing experiences. I'm so glad that this worked out. Just beyond this trip, I already know that you and I are going to stay into contact, and I feel like I've already made a wonderful friend in you, and you showing me around the city today, and us having a wonderful Korean-Japanese fusion meal.
Yeah,
which was
that was good.
Amazing. That place was legit. So how can we find you, Zenzo?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, and it's been a pleasure and fun showing you around. You can find me on YouTube primarily, so it's Tazawa Tanks on YouTube. So I've got... right now, a couple hundred videos, and I post videos twice a week. So every Wednesday and Sunday, I release a video. In addition to YouTube, you can also find me on Facebook. So I have a Facebook page, which is also Tazawa Tanks. And I am releasing some video on Facebook as well. And I'm going to be doing some Facebook-specific videos in the future that are not going to be showcased on YouTube. And I'm also on Instagram. So my Instagram is Tazawa_tanks. And I post a lot of kind of fun photos of fish, and it's all fish stuff on that Instagram page.
Yeah, so Zenzo's awesome. I mean, he's a fish nerd just like you and I. So go ahead and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Follow him on all the social media, and just drink in the awesome, cool stuff that he puts out there. Obviously you've heard him talk to me for almost an hour now, and it's just been a fantastic fish nerd conversation. So again, Zenzo, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Aquarist Podcast. As always, get involved in your local fish club, help grow this wonderful hobby, and have fun with other fish nerds.